Let's take the soldiers for Stroger example. Now, I know personally the insane amount of corruption that occurs under the Stroger Cook County president machine, with its shady deals, its obvious political hiring practices, and its use of public workers to back and bankroll their own political campaigns. I was even with Jesse Jackson Jr. when he organized the effective Boston Tea Party Chicago style, where frustrated Chicago citizens poured bottled water into the Chicago River in protest of the daily Stroger corrupt tax plan and special interest deals that they were going to force the Chicago taxpayers to pay for. You detail the Stroger corruption quite substantially in the book, but then you go on to accuse Obama for not being a true reformer. You say, quote, "Had Obama lifted even his pinky finger in the name of change we can believe in, there would be no Strogers in power today. There would be no more soldiers for Stroger, abusing civil servants and pocketing taxpayers' cash." But realistically, though, could Obama have not taken on the behemoth daily Stroger political machine out of future prospects for his political career and future prospects to get true reform legislation through? I mean, I hear from friends in Chicago politics that if you even dare lift a pinky against the political machine, then you'll soon find yourself without a job, beaten up by random thugs, or even blackmailed.
It's actually kind of hard to believe, and I understand when one of the liberal reviewers of my book said that I believe in conspiracy theories because I explained Chicago politics. It's actually that bad. I mean, it's not. It's almost too much to believe, but all of these things are true, and it's almost like you think to yourself, "Boy, wouldn't it be crazy if that had happened?" And then you look it up, and sure enough, it did happen. I mean, it's you can't make some of this stuff up. But precisely to go to your question, there is a tradition of reform politicians in Chicago. They do exist. You have, particularly on the left, you have a tradition of that, and some of them have succeeded. Senator Paul Simon was a great example of that. You had congressmen from Chicago who were reformers. You actually have some today. I mean, Danny Davis, from what I can tell, is one of the good guys in Chicago, and somehow he's holding a seat in Congress. And, you know, he was the guy who tried to prevent Todd Stroger from being put on that ballot in that shady, you know, when John Stroger had the stroke and goes into hiding for 3 months. You know, there are reformers in Chicago, but it's easier to get ahead and really succeed if you take the path that Obama's taken, the path of least resistance, where you simply accommodate yourself to the machine politics in Chicago. So you can kind of understand it, I guess. And I've seen Obama's supporters. One of the examples I cite of this in the New Republic. One of them made the argument that, well, Senator Obama really is a reformer, and I know that he just endorsed Dorothy Tillman and Mayor Daley and Todd Stroger, and I know that he's doing all these things that make it look like he's the opposite of a reformer, but he's just got to be savvy because he's got to get ahead, and then he'll bring about real reform. And that sounds great, except that the argument you're making here is that he will be the first reformer ever to become president of the United States without having done anything serious or difficult in the name of reform. I think that's a completely bogus argument, that if being a true reformer and looking out for the common good means that you can't be president, then perhaps we're stuck in this position where a good man can't be president. But don't tell me that Barack Obama is one of these guys who has stuck out his neck for stuff, or who, oh, well, he would stick out his neck if only, you know, sorry, that doesn't fly.
You start the book off by talking about Obama's first political campaign and how you say he knocked off all his political opponents. Now, a lot of people hadn't heard of this, and I hadn't even read this before going through your book. Could you tell us what exactly happened?
Sure. What's really funny, and I mean, I knew about this. This has been in several major publications. So I was amazed at the number of people I would run into who had no idea about this. They had never heard this story. And when I picked up The Audacity of Hope and started reading it, I immediately realized that I had hit on something hilarious, because he offers a fictional account of that election in his book, where he says that he went around the neighborhoods of the South Side giving this speech about how there's, you know, yes, politicians give you every reason to be cynical, but if we work together, we can change things. There's a great tradition in American politics of setting aside our own selfish interests and working for the common good, and yes, we can, and, you know, wonderful, wonderful words. And then he says that I thought it was a pretty convincing speech. I don't know if the people who heard it thought so, but they liked me and my youthful swagger enough that they sent me to the Illinois legislature. Well, that's a fictional account of what happened. He actually went and threw all his opponents off the ballot. He doesn't mention that part in The Audacity of Hope, and he's deeply embarrassed by it. Otherwise, he wouldn't misrepresent the way he'd actually been elected. This is something I mentioned in my Wall Street Journal piece today, precisely that it's pretty hard to meld this image of that he's projecting, change and hope, with the guy who throws all his opponents off the ballot and deprives the voters of a choice.
But I could say, but look, he threw them off the ballot or had them, you know, removed from the ballot because he was just being a good reformer, scrutinizing their signatures, their petition signatures that were from bribed signatures or from people who didn't live in the district.
Sure, you know, he was doing a public service for the nation when he threw all of his opponents off the ballot. If you want to make that argument, I'm perfectly happy to listen to it. I think most people hear that and they get a different impression.
I found an excerpt of one of Obama's writings that you highlighted interesting. Obama wrote that in 1983, when he decided he wanted to be a community organizer, quote, "There wasn't much detail to the idea. When classmates in college asked me just what it was that a community organizer did, I couldn't answer them directly. Instead, I pronounced on the need for change. Change in the White House, change in the Congress, change in the mood of the country." Now, how successful has Obama been, would you say, as a politician, as an activist, as a speaker, emphasizing more simple themes over detail? It's an amazing skill that he has. He is blessed with an amazing rhetorical skill and use of those skills to articulate very nice bipartisan-sounding messages. What do you think of this? And specifically, could you comment on the 2004 keynote address at the Democratic National Convention?
Well, it is typical of politicians to give speeches where they avoid details. Obama, though, has a special gift for this, and David Mendel, the Tribune reporter who wrote the Obama from Promise to Power, describes this as this charming lack of specificity that he has, or ingenious lack of specificity is the way he puts it. That is, I thought when I read it, I just thought that exactly fits everything I thought about Senator Obama. This makes perfect sense. Because when he discusses issues, he's able to do it in a way where you may be a conservative and I may be a liberal sitting in the room with him, and each of us thinks that he just said something I agree with. That was what that 2004 speech was really all about. He was able to talk about a sort of culturally conservative theme about get your kids away from the television, and you know, it's just because you're reading a book, it's not fair to say that a black kid with a book is white. You know, all great stuff that he could have almost given that speech. If you take out the references to John Kerry, he could have almost delivered that entire speech at the Republican convention later on. So that's a great talent that he has. It's part of what has allowed his media campaign to attract people to him without realizing that all of his ideological leanings, whenever he's not acting in some sort of special interest, either for the machine, for the low-income housing developers he likes to help, the teachers' unions, whoever it is, his ideological leanings are clearly very far to the left, whether it's on economic policy, whether it's on gun rights, whether it's on abortion, all of these things. He takes positions that are quite extreme, but most people don't know anything about those positions because of the ingenious lack of specificity. You need sort of a counter campaign to educate people, because when they hear him speak, it's wonderful. It's cotton candy. It's sweet in your mouth, and there's nothing there. Who would know from hearing a speech like that, where he talks about the inalienable right to life, that Senator Obama's promise from last year that the first thing he will do as President of the United States, and you can look it up on YouTube where he says this, his first act as president is to sign a bill that will re-legalize partial birth abortion.
But Obama supporters say that Obama will respect the law of the land and walk a fine, moderate stance when it comes to abortion, not being too proactive.
No, that's not his plan. He said we aren't just going to play defense. We have to play offense. And he promised, as his first act as president,